Hello, everyone. Welcome to the March Outdoor Ethics Virtual Roundtable. My name is Matt Durant. I'm one of the ones that helps out with this committee putting these on. Tonight, we have a special treat. We have Andrew Leary from the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics will be our presenter tonight. Also, please make sure that while he's presenting and while everyone else is speaking here, that your microphones are muted. That way we don't hear the background noise coming from your house. That would be much appreciated. Thank you. So this is the agenda for tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, the Oath and Law, and the Outdoor Code, which I will present. And so while we are doing those, again, please mute your microphone. That way we don't get all the feedback and everything. You'll just hear me go through that, and you can repeat it with me. Just everyone will be muted. As soon as we're done with that, we'll have a quick safety moment that Paula will present. And then Chandra will introduce our presenter, Andrew Leary, and the rest of the time will be given to Andrew for his presentation. Also, while he's doing his presentation, we're sure that there's going to be many questions. If you wouldn't mind using the chat feature to post your questions, we have several people that will be keeping an eye on that, and we will have a Q&A session as soon as Andrew is done with his presentation. That way we'll try and get all of your questions, get them answered, and make sure that we take care of all of that. When this meeting is concluded, we will make the recording available on the Outdoor Ethics YouTube page so that you can come back and reference this anytime that you would like to come back and see it. So continuing on with the program, we'll go ahead and go into the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, and we already talked about that. So there we go. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2. And the Scout oath, please repeat with me. On my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country and to obey the Scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. The Scout law. A Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And finally, the Outdoor Code. As an American, I will do my best to be clean in my outdoor manners, be careful with fire, be considerate in the outdoors, and be conservation-minded. 2. All right, we will turn the time over to Paula for our safety moment.
Who doesn't love a glowing campfire at the end of the day? However, to make sure it won't be your tent that burns, let's look at some good fire safety practices. Handbooks for each program, Cub Scouting, Scouts BSA, Venturing, and Sea Scouting have useful tips for campfires. Some of these tips include: no flames in tents. Even if the tent has a vent for wood burning stove, don't use it. Instead, set up a dining fly and be sure to set up a camp stove for your cooking area at least 3 feet away from the dining fly. The no flames rule also applies to candle lanterns, citronella coils, or anything else that is ignited by a flame. Never place infrared heater inside a tent. Matches, lighters, and items used as fire starters, such as shredded paper or paraffin wax and sawdust, should be stored outside of your tents in a secure box or bag. Camp stoves, which typically have 2 or more burners and use propane, butane, or white gas as fuel, should be set up properly, following the manufacturer's instructions. A solution of soapy water should be used to test for gas leakage at all threaded connections. Also, make sure to follow manufacturer's instructions when lighting the burners on a camp stove. Find more tips and resources for this and other safety moments at the Scouting Safely website on scouting.org.
You may notice that this was a little bit different, and several of the safety moments on the BSA website have podcasts that go along with them. And thank you for being safe when you go outside.
All right, thank you, Paula. We'll go ahead and turn the time over to Chandra to introduce Andrew Leary, the National Outreach Manager from the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics, who is our featured presenter tonight.
Good evening, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker for our Outdoor Ethics Virtual Roundtable, Mr. Andrew Leary, staff member of the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. Andrew manages the Leave No Trace for Every Kid, the national youth initiative that reaches young people in camps, schools, scouts, and after-school settings. He oversees curriculum and program development, outcomes evaluation, and collaboration with the center's youth serving partners, which includes Boy Scouts of America. He has a BA in journalism from the University of Oregon and an MS in youth development and adventure outdoor programming from the University of Utah. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Andrew for his presentation.
Well, thanks for that introduction, Chandra, and it's great to be here with you all tonight. Let me just get my screen share set up. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you see the Leave No Trace logo on your screen. All right, perfect. Well, I'm thrilled to be here with you all tonight. I've been fortunate to work with the Scouts my entire time. I've been with Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics since 2015. And in that time, no doubt all the thankless work that you all do to bring stewardship as a part of the outdoor code, as a part of your teaching and how you incorporate it into various rank advancement, adventure, other activities that aren't necessarily formalized in that way, and certainly camp settings. So thank you in advance for that. Tonight's presentation workshop is around this idea of where is Leave No Trace, specifically at a camp setting. So that's an idea that we're going to unpack. You might have some ideas of your own. I certainly have ideas of my own as well, and that's really what I'm going to share with you. In addition to working for Leave No Trace, I have a background working for the YMCA, and I was a former camp director for a camp in Michigan. And I had every role at that camp under the sun. I was everything from the CIT, who was given the responsibility to work with kids when I was a junior in high school, up through senior counselor, adventure trip staff, assistant director, and then director roles. So the perspective that I bring is very much through that lens, as well as Leave No Trace. Before we get going into this idea of where Leave No Trace is, I figure because there's so many of us on this webinar, which is so fantastic, I just wanted to go through some foundational things just so we're all on the same page and you can hear it from my perspective as well. Starting with what is Leave No Trace. Leave No Trace is a program that helps people protect the outdoors, and it does that by teaching them and inspiring them to enjoy it responsibly. The idea of Leave No Trace has been around since the late 1960s, 70s, and 80s, when land managers were seeing an increase in visitation to wild lands, quote, wild lands here in the United States. And there were impacts that were resulting from people being outdoors. And that same thing is applicable today. So with the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics, which is over 25 years old, we still encounter that same issue of uninformed, uneducated, careless actions that are totally avoidable. And that's what Leave No Trace can help people understand. What is it that's causing an impact and what they can do about it, how they can minimize that impact. There are more and more people going out onto public lands. That is especially true of the last year with the pandemic as well. Not only do people feel safe outdoors, but federal guidelines and state guidance also encourage people to seek the outdoors as a place where they could, escape the monotony of their home setting or wherever they might be dwelling during the pandemic. So with so many people getting outdoors, which is so great, there of course is a lot of impact that results from that. And Leave No Trace is really the best way to minimize impacts in the outdoors. it's good to explain it, and I'm doing this for you so that you can also carry this on to your own Leave No Trace education that you provide to other people. You know, what are those impacts that we're seeing out on public lands? A lot of people associate Leave No Trace with, oh, you're the trash people. Pack it in, pack it out. And for some people, it ends there. And that's a great entry point, but we want to bring them into more impacts beyond trash. So I'm going to go through some photos here. Here's an example of a wildlife impact. A chipmunk and human food. Clearly, they don't mix. The food that we bring into the outdoor setting is not appropriate for any wildlife. It is not their natural diet. It also contains foods that are unhealthy for them. Interestingly enough, at Grand Canyon National Park, I believe there are squirrels there that have been fed so much human food by visitors who think it's cute. You take a photo of it, it's a thing, that some of those squirrels are actually diabetic from the change in their diet as a result of human food. So this is a small scale. Obviously, there may not be immediate safety concerns when it comes to a chipmunk, although chipmunks, squirrels, and other animals this size do carry viruses and things we aren't aware of, but certainly larger animals here in North America, bears, cats, moose, any of those big animals that could cause harm to humans or the people that we're with. And typically in a wildlife versus human interaction, it's really the wildlife that end up losing. You may hear about bear attacks or things that occur during the course of the year. Here in Colorado, where I'm based, it's very common to have, encounters between humans and black bears, and it is always the black bears that lose. They always get relocated. They always get tagged in their ears, and after 3 encounters with humans, then unfortunately land managers have to make the decision of, do we keep relocating this animal or do we take lethal steps? So wildlife impacts are huge. Another example of wildlife impacts, very common in the West, of people wanting to take photos with animals or photos of animals. And technology is great. It allows us to take photos from really far away of animals. But there are those folks out there who are uneducated and unintentionally impact wildlife by approaching them and wanting to take photos or wanting to take videos. I'm sure that we all have seen this somewhere in our adventures in the outdoors, carvings. These particular photos, the one on the left side of your screen, carvings into a tree. The one on the right side of the screen,
the rules of knives,
rock.
And you never carve your initials in your Scoutmaster's chest.
Sorry, I was getting some feedback. So in both of these cases, the carvings were left there by humans. They were done intentionally. Whether these people knew that the impacts of them carving would leave this forever, or until the tree dies, or until the rock is broken apart, which takes a very long time, these carvings are there forever. And it really can be an interrupt to the outdoor experience for other visitors, in addition to ecologically speaking, cutting into tree bark is something that is probably going to harm the tree in the long run. It's going to allow bacteria and other fungi and things into the tree, and the bark really acts as its skin to protect it. Here's another quick example of carvings. This is in the American Southwest region. So just like carvings in trees and in rocks, carvings in very hardy plants within the cactus family or within the aloe family, they leave a lasting impact. And I guarantee you that not all these people carved their name all at the same time. One person that carved their name, and then the next person came along and saw that that carving was there and believed that to be the norm, that it was okay for someone to carve their name there because somebody else did it beforehand. Similar to leaving trash in a fire pit at a campground. Well, somebody did it before me, so it must be okay. This is the cumulative impact of Leave No Trace. This is the cumulative impact of what can happen when people aren't practicing Leave No Trace. And ultimately, this plant did die. It lost moisture. It allowed bacteria and fungus in. So carvings on plants can be common as well. We see a lot of vegetation and soil impacts. This actually used to be one single track trail. And because of various reasons, but a lot of it having to do with hiker behavior, mostly, this now looks as if it's a Jeep road. And it's simply because hikers probably decided to avoid mud puddles, or probably decided to give somebody the right of way. And instead of stopping on a durable surface, they continued to walk, which created another trail. It doesn't take that much to compress soil and trample vegetation to the point where there's more oxygenation, and water can't meet the roots of certain grasses and plants, and this is the result. Believe it or not, this was a photo that someone took, and it was not the person who was dwelling at this campsite. Nobody was around when this photo was taken. So the person who took this photo stumbled upon the site, took the photo. But interestingly enough, we do know that what's in the middle there is a fire scar, and that is the result of one night's worth of fire. So clearly there's no fire ring. There's no attempt to have a mound fire or something else that is going to help minimize the impacts. So in addition to the obvious scar that's left here, you can see it's quite thick. And what is underneath that top layer of duff is not mineral soil. It's more duff. And duff, if you're unaware, is like the leaves and twigs and sticks that all fall to the forest floor. We've all walked on it before. What can be detrimental when a fire situation is going on here is that if this fire was not put out properly, which I'm only going to guess from the photo that it probably wasn't, because I only see one water jug in the right side, and it certainly does not look like enough water to put a giant fire out. Fires can spread underneath these duff layers and continue on. And this is how a lot of significant forest fires can take place. 9 out of 10 forest fires are human caused. So we can do a lot by practicing leave no trace and minimizing our fire impacts. And then finally, these are getting into the realm of social impacts. And there are a lot of different types of social impacts. This is rock stacking. I'm sure we've all seen it before. This happens to be right outside of our offices in Boulder, Colorado, about 10 minutes away from our office. A lot of folks stack rocks for different reasons. One reason that is a benefit in the outdoors is, you've probably heard the term a cairn before, but a cairn can help guide you along your trail or around your route. If there's no obvious trail, it can be a marker and an indicator. So in some areas where cairns are used to mark routes and rock stacking like this takes place, there can be some negative consequences related to hikers' safety. It could lead them astray. For a lot of people, this is also a cosmetic experience that they don't want to see in the outdoors. And I work with the trail crew that manages this area, and I work with them every year. We do a trainer course for them every year, and every year they tell me that whenever they come across this, they always just go through and kick them all down. Whether you may not be able to tell, but the surface that these rock stacks are on is rock, so it's okay that they're going onto that to, kind of kick it as they will and disperse the rocks. But they keep coming back. It's a very popular area to hike. There's a university that's very close by, and despite fencing and signs that have gone up, which are some other photos on there, the rock stacking persists. So what the Leave No Trace program has been able to do is help instill this idea that there are impacts to the outdoors that are avoidable and manageable, and we can all play a part. And there's this huge power behind this nationwide effort to provide education and messaging to folks, not in a heavy-handed way, not in a way that says this is the rules of the outdoors, but that guides people through seeing that Leave No Trace it's a set of values. And you're going to hear me talk about this a little later, but Leave No Trace, when it comes down to it, is responsibility, respect, and caring for the outdoors. So it really, the Leave No Trace program provides a foundation to build this nationwide ethic of all people who experience the outdoors, no matter how they choose to do so, whether it's as an individual, in a group, in a remote setting, in a city park, human-powered endeavors, vehicle-powered endeavors, off-roading, those types of things. So we can really build this nationwide ethic through the Leave No Trace program. Now, one thing to really keep in mind with Leave No Trace, and some of you may have seen this spectrum idea before, and for some this may be new, but there's no perfect way to practice Leave No Trace. And we don't ask people to be perfect. We ask people to do something, because something's better than nothing. So that's why when people associate Leave No Trace with picking up trash, and it kind of ends there when I'm talking with them, at least they're associating it with something. But I always try and take it a little further. I always try and expand them a little bit more. So the reason why this spectrum is important is because all of us here, and certainly all of the scouts that are going to be at camp with you this summer, all appear on this spectrum at different places. And they all appear in different places for a lot of different reasons. Some people have been taught Leave No Trace before. Some people haven't been taught Leave No Trace before. Some people have been in the Scouts for a long time. Some people, it's their first year. Some people's families have exposed them to the idea of stewardship, or specifically Leave No Trace, and other people's may not. In a lot of ways, learning Leave No Trace at a young age is a privilege for a lot of people that go outdoors, and not everybody has access to that privilege. So the important thing is to recognize where people are on the spectrum, recognize where you are on this spectrum, and then what is it going to take to move to the left side of the spectrum. And it doesn't really matter how quickly you move there. We just want to move people generally as a trend left. If we're teaching them about Leave No Trace and they're moving right, meaning that there are more significant impacts after our Leave No Trace education, well, then something didn't work for that individual. The way we delivered that education, the context, the setting, something didn't work for them. So again, you're going to have campers and co-staff members and other folks that you work for at camp. You're all going to be at different places on the Leave No Trace spectrum. And we're all trying to get to that end of making fewer impacts. For some people, they're going to get to that end of the spectrum quicker. For some people, it's a little slower, and that's okay. The 7 principles of Leave No Trace. So imagine for a second that there's a giant cloud above you, wherever you are right now, a giant like rain cloud. That rain cloud is filled with Leave No Trace research and facts and statistics and empirical evidence and years of repeated research in different outdoor areas here in North America and internationally. It's really hard to take everything that's in that cloud and try and teach it to people in a short amount of time. So what the folks who started thinking about Leave No Trace in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, of course, thought about is, well, how can we disseminate this information so that it is something that's readable, it's something we can talk about, and it's something that's concise, meaning it's short and it's to the point. And that's really what the 7 principles of Leave No Trace represent. They are the 7 vessels, if you will, that hold all that information in that cloud above you. And it's a really great way for people to compartmentalize various aspects of Leave No Trace, starting with plan ahead and prepare, ending with be considerate of others or share the outdoors. All of these principles are connected together like an aspen grove. So whether if they're individual trees, 7 trees sticking up above the ground, their root structures connected underneath, right? We know plan ahead and prepare relates to disposing of waste properly and minimizing our campfire impacts and respect wildlife and be considerate and travel in camp. They are all interlaced and they are not independent of one another. So the 7 principles are great. They're awesome entry point, but it's okay to go beyond the 7 principles as well. Sometimes going beyond memorization of bullet points and going beyond things and asking reflective, open-ended questions and putting it in the context of what people's experience is can be a very powerful way to teach Leave No Trace. And that's really where our education and training come in. I'm sure many people here have gone through our Master Educator course or our trainer level course, and likely an awareness workshop, whether it was virtual or in person. And those are just the formal training opportunities offered by the center. Through the Boy Scout ecosystem, there are many different types of trainings that bring Leave No Trace into the fold. And that's a really important aspect of thinking about Leave No Trace at camp. The way that Leave No Trace is powerful is not that it exists only in one place or only in a certain type of context. We have to try and make sure that it's a part of everything that we do. Again, because It's a value system: respect, responsibility, caring. The way that we learn values as a human is not by compartmentalizing it and saying, like, I'm only going to think about respect when I do these things on the weekend with these people, right? Like in school, after school programs, the scouts, our families, there are different ways that we learn this idea of respect. And from a young age, it's usually respect for other people. I have a 1-year-old and I have nephews that are 4 and 2. And so thinking about like young children, they learn about respect with the idea of sharing toys. And so it goes on developmentally in different stages for us. So how can we learn about respect, responsibility, and caring over and over and over again in a way that isn't annoying, isn't being preached to? And really the camp setting offers the best opportunity to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And the reason is because camp, whether it's a day camp in a more urban area or a residential camp that's far away and remote, a Philmont type camp, for example, it's the perfect mix of the outdoor environment and activities that engage you with the outdoors. Camp's also a great place that activates millions of children and adults each year. Scout camps, YMCA camps, there are a whole host of camps all across the country and internationally that bring children and adults into the outdoors. It's also a place where we form this natural or this connection with the outdoors, this affinity for the outdoors. I would fare to guess that you all have had experiences in your life that you felt connected to the outdoors, and they probably happened at a younger age, perhaps, but maybe at an older age. But those pinnacle experiences are probably what kept you in the Scouts or keep you in the Scouts or keep you wanting to go back outdoors. I know I have my own from when I grew up. Even though I grew up outside of the city of Chicago, I still was able to engage in the outdoors in a meaningful way that led me to where I am now. Camp is also a fantastic place to talk about values and asset development. And we don't always explicitly do that with campers, but behind the scenes, the architecture of how summer camps are meant to work, high quality summer camps, use values and asset development to their benefit. And I'll talk about that more in a second. Participants spend time on city and public lands. And then there's also engaging programming that has daily routines to it. So there are a lot of reasons why Leave No Trace in camp makes sense. But the two that we're going to kind of focus on is this idea of values development and engaging programming and daily routines. And to kind of bring that into the fold, I want to share a story from when I was a camp director. So this is a photo of a dining hall. And just to, I'm going to give you a quick story about when I was a camp director and why the dining hall is important. And then we're actually going to have a special guest on later who's going to give her perspective about the dining hall experience. So for me, this is a dining hall. And at my camp, we had, at the end of our 2-week sessions, I would get phone calls from parents, and these parents would be just so ecstatic that their kid came home from camp, 2 weeks of camp, and when dinner was finished, they cleared the table. They started doing the dishes. They started cleaning up. And parents were just, like totally blown away that their kid did this, like unprompted. Maybe before camp or in a prior time, it was always a struggle to, you clear the dishes. Okay, I guess I will. But the stories from these parents, while they were short, they were all the same, and parents were just blown away by it. And when I was a director in my 20s, a young director, I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, well, clearly that kid got home from camp and is doing what we do at camp. So I'm great at transferred over, but I never really gave it much thought why. It wasn't until I started studying youth development that I figured out why this event happened. And it's because at our camp in our dining hall, we ate 3 meals a day there every day for 14 days. So it was this repeatable daily activity where everybody in camp came back together. In addition to that, our camp ate family style. So instead of going up through the line and filling your tray, kind of cafeteria style, we had family style where food was portioned out into larger bowls or trays and brought to round tables. And the way that our camp was set up is that we had within the cabin, so 12 campers to a cabin, each day there would be 2 campers who would be responsible for being the servers for the day. They used to call, the term we used to use was waiter, but that was not an appropriate term to continue using. So I believe they use servers because we had male and female and genders in between attending our camp. So they were essentially wait staff. And what they would do is they would set the table ahead of the mealtime every day for those 3 periods. They would put the family style food on the table in those bowls. And then after the meal, they would clean up, and that would rotate. So you'd probably do that you'd probably do it 2 or 3 times a session for those 2 weeks. And then in addition to family style, the benefit is when something runs out, one person gets up and refills the bowl. So if we were having lasagna and the garlic bread ran out, then one person would get up and go ask the kitchen staff to refill the bowl of garlic bread and bring it back. The power in those actions of practicing, setting up a meal and cleaning up, and also being responsible when food gets finished and replenishing it for your cabin. There's respect and responsibility and caring that's interwoven into all of that. And we didn't just practice it once. We gave our kids the opportunity to do it 3 times a day, every day. And not only were they doing it within their own cabin, but we had 400 kids at our camp, and they would see everybody else doing the same thing. Everybody else is in the same boat. So the reason I say this is because as I think back to it now, had we not had this structure at our camp, there is no way that I would have gotten phone calls from parents to say that that behavior of responsibility carried over once they got home. The reason I'm sharing this with you is because Leave No Trace is the exact same thing. If we can teach Leave No Trace multiple times a day, maybe in the same way, but it doesn't have to be, but multiple times a day, multiple opportunities to learn, multiple ways to see Leave No Trace modeled by other campers and other adult mentors and things like that, then I guarantee you that that behavior is going to transfer to them beyond camp when they go back home or when they're meeting with their troop again or their pack or things like that. So that brings me to this question of where is Leave No Trace on camp? Now, we're going to do a little activity here. Don't go yet. I'll tell you when to go. But here's what you're going to do. This is a map of a made-up camp. Clearly, there are a lot of facilities here. That is on purpose. Clearly, there are a lot of areas here and a lot of items. Not every camp may look like this, and I acknowledge that. But for our purposes, we want to see all these areas. So what you're going to do, but not yet, is you're going to click the view button at the top of your screen, and then you're going to click annotate. And then from there, you're going to pick a style. I suggest a stamp. That's usually the easiest, or a drawing, the drawing line, and then a dark color. Light colors won't show up on this screen. And then what I want you to do is pick 3 places where Leave No Trace is important at camp. Where do you think Leave No Trace is important? Now, before you make your mark, I want you to make sure that we're not covering up the names of the places, because we want to be able to see where everybody thinks Leave No Trace is important. So go ahead now, click view, click annotate. We'll take a couple minutes to do this. You can circle things, that's okay too. But we'll take a couple minutes, and with the 100+ people that we have here, we should have quite a bit of input about where Leave No Trace is. Seeing lots of Leave No Trace in a lot of the green spaces on camp, a lot of the treed areas. That's great. All right, this is amazing. If you're still picking your places, go ahead and keep doing that. I'm going to talk a little bit while we do this. So the purpose of this exercise, and what I think you all are seeing, is that Leave No Trace has virtually application at every part of camp, whether it's the nature trail or the camp out or the waterfront area or the softball field or the lacrosse field, the sand volleyball pit, the health center, the dining hall. Leave no trace can literally be everywhere. The cabins can have leave no trace. The trail into camp can have leave no trace. Horseback riding obviously has leave no trace. So why this is important is because now I want you to stop annotating and I want you to think about, does leave no trace really exist in all these places at your camp? I want you to really think about it. And while you're thinking about it, I'm going to share with you a little insight from some research that we did in 2016 and 2017. So what I'm going to share with you is that, let me see if I can find my stamp here. Okay. So when we were talking to camps in 2016 and 2017, the majority of people said that their leave no trace existed for them in only a couple of places. And those couple of places were the nature trail areas and the campouts. That's where the majority of people said leave no trace existed. Now, I don't find fault with people who believe that it only exists there. But my question is, if we only teach leave no trace in these select areas that maybe not everybody goes to every day, then are we really developing these values the best way that we can? The camp out experience, for instance, at the camp that I went to and a camp I was a director at, we would have a camp out once over that 2-week session for our main campers, as we called it, the kids who signed up for, you know, a variety of activities on the peninsula where our camp was. And we'd go have an overnight experience without tents, but we'd camp over, or we'd cook over an open fire and things like that. That was the only camping experience that those kids got. And we had some other programs that were much more immersive. But if we only taught leave no trace on those camp out experiences and didn't teach it anywhere else, well, I can guarantee you that, you know, young minds start associating things very quickly, and they only put leave no trace in that one bucket of, well, you only do this on your camp out. Why would I do it in a city park? Why would I do it in my backyard? Why would I do it along in my cabin, for instance? Now, I'm not saying all this so that we start going around and saying like, well, we're going to go leave no trace the cabin, or we're going to go leave no trace the van, as a meaning to say we're going to go clean the van. The reason I'm talking about this is because there's the idea of planning ahead and preparing. There's the idea of minimizing our impacts. There's the idea of being considerate of other people in all of these places around camp. So think about that. Think about your favorite areas at camp, and does leave no trace exist? And if it doesn't, how could it exist there for you? I'll give you some insights about how. What are some next steps that you can take so that you can bring leave no trace into these areas on camp? I mentioned that leave no trace is a value system. So how do scouts develop values in general? Oh, thank you for everyone that participated, by the way. How do scouts develop values? Scouts talk about values. Scouts teach about values. Adults teach children or scouts about various scouting values, and it's also peer-to-peer, right? Scouts also practice and model values. And then finally, values are celebrated and recognized, and the scouts actually do this in one of the coolest ways, which is badge recognition, rank advancement. Those types of things can be really impactful, and I'm sure we're very impactful for you all who have been in the Boy Scouts or through the scouting system for a very long time. But the take home for this is that scouts don't just develop values from that one experience that they have. It's something that's holistic. It's built into everything that you all do. The same thing is true about leave no trace. We talk about leave no trace regularly. We teach about leave no trace, going beyond just the bullet points of the 7 principles. And we really try and tease out, what does minimize campfire impacts really mean to you as an individual? How do you think you can make a difference? Why do you think you make a difference? You can also practice and model leave no trace very easily. There are a lot of great hard skills that are associated with leave no trace. Think of disposal of human waste. If you don't have a wag bag or something like that, you're probably digging a cat hole or you're digging a trench or something. There are great hard skills associated with that where we can teach people. People can be very hands-on, especially for those haptic learners and those hands-on learners. It can be a great opportunity to see leave no trace in action. And then we celebrate and recognize leave no trace. It's the same exact way. What are the ways that you celebrate and recognize individuals or groups at your camp? Could you do that explicitly for Leave No Trace in a public setting? Could you do that? I bet you could. So that camp map that we looked at was all looking at the physical spaces on camp. Now I want you to think about the more temporal spaces on camp, and that really relates to the camp schedule. So this is a made-up camp schedule of a day camp. And for those of you who have worked at day camps or have not, so there's the morning welcome. So campers get dropped off by their parents or guardians or picked up or whatever. And then there's the morning welcome from the staff. And then you go right into that first activity. You might have 2 rounds of activities before lunch, and you actually have lunch. Then you might give campers free time. They perceive it as free time, but you know it's really free time, and they're kind of corralled into one area or within view. You as a staff member are very much still on the job, but those kids are having kind of unstructured time with their peers, which is super important in the camp setting. And then there might be more afternoon activities. And then finally, you have your wrap up and end of the day kind of rituals or things that you might do to prepare for the next day. So my question is, where does Leave No Trace fit into a camper's daily schedule? I gave you that example of the dining hall as something that we did 3 times a day, and it wasn't explicitly Leave No Trace, but that idea of responsibility totally applied there. So where does Leave No Trace perhaps have the power to live at your camp program or within your schedule multiple times a day in something that's repeatable and something that's predictable? Something to keep in mind. I mentioned that we were going to have another guest speaker with us, and I'm actually going to stop screen sharing here for a second. But Karen Farrell and I were chatting, and there were some really cool things that she did at her camp and is now doing at her current scout camp, or attempting to do. Karen, I believe you're with us. I saw you there earlier. Oh, there you are.
I'm here.
Hi, Karen. Good to see you.
Hello.
I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit about the issue that your camp's dining hall was facing regarding trash?
Yes, at Buffalo Trails Scout Ranch in Buffalo Trails Council, which is West Texas, they had a real issue with the volume of trash that was generated in the dining hall, as we all tend to have, because they were using styrofoam trays and everybody was just dumping the trays into trash bags. And we all realized that creates a lot of volume. So they instituted a different plot. They set up 2 trash bins and the water bin next to a table. And the scouts were to put anything that would be recyclable into the one tray, the one bin, shake the trays into the next bin, pour any liquids into the liquid bucket, and then stack the utensils and the trays they were using. Doing this, they managed to reduce the trash output by volume down to 1/3 of what it had been.
So it sounds like there was not only was there a positive reduction in trash, but I'm sure that had some economic benefits for the camp as well, right?
A definitive economic value. They had to have their dumpsters emptied far less frequently, which was a great cost savings, because if you've ever been out to BTSR, it's quite a drive to get there. So bringing in a trash truck was an expense.
So clearly there's a connection between minimizing waste and also helping to minimize budget items. So something to keep in mind for people who are attending here, who might be in that realm as an administrator at camp, or even if you're a younger camp staff member, something to keep in mind to encourage your supervisors and things to think about. Karen, I know you're at a different camp now. So what lessons have you learned that you're applying at Camp Strake?
Camp Strake's a brand new facility, just opened for major use in December. And what we're trying to institute there is a similar process with the multiple bucket system of, how to empty your tray. We're trying to switch away from those vile styrofoam trays and plastic utensils into reusable, washable utensils. They've got a brand new dining hall, great kitchen facilities, It's time to put that dishwasher to use. They're following through with that. We're trying to get with a professional composting organization so that we can segregate trash to include compostables. Looking into setting up residential size composting bins at all the campsites so the scouts can practice it where they have their midday meals. Turning that composting into a benefit for a vegetable garden outside the STEM center so the scouts can actually see the benefit of doing these things in action. Out on the hiking trails where we've got trash cans because scouts use them to go from program area to program area, in addition to having just a trash bin, setting up a recycle bin out there and putting a couple of sentences of educational information at each one of those so they learn a little bit while they get rid of their stuff. And just having a great time trying to redo and build in outdoor ethics. Because if we say it out loud, then we have to follow it and set the example for the young people to follow too.
That's great, Karen. Thanks. The closing question I have for you, and this is just general, what place do you think Leave No Trace values have at camp?
Every place, every square inch of the facility.
That's great. I'm sure that a lot of people here are starting to think that way, or maybe came into this webinar already thinking that way. So thank you for sharing the wonderful efforts that that you and your colleagues at those camps have put into place to help minimize waste, to help make things more efficient, to help promote education, outdoor ethics education to scouts. And I'm sure that your financial people are also thanking you for reducing the budget as well.
Absolutely.
I'm going to reshare my screen here. Okay, so you've heard talking about dining halls twice now. Clearly, Karen has an appreciation for the dining hall experience. I have an appreciation for the dining hall experience, but it's not the only place on camp. Think about those places that you love at camp. Think about the places that you work at camp. Is Leave No Trace at those places? Do you talk about Leave No Trace in the biking area? Do you talk about Leave No Trace in the nature area? Do you talk about it in the waterfront area? And if you don't, there are some easy, simple steps that you can take to bring it in. So the first thing to do would just be, brainstorm and write down some ideas. How did the 7 principles apply to the activity in the area that I work at camp? That is a very simple way, because once you start thinking about how the 7 principles work, well, then you can welcome campers into that activity area, and you can, give them briefings about Leave No Trace for the day, or ask them, engaging open-ended questions about what does Leave No Trace mean in the sailing area here, or what does Leave No Trace mean for our horseback trail ride today that we're going to go on. Open-ended questions are a great way to invite people into giving their perspective and their personal experience about what stewardship is. If you want to continue to take it a step further, Leave No Trace absolutely has specific 7 principles guidance for a whole host of outdoor activities that are very common at camp. And so you can find those at lnt.org. Also on the Outdoor Ethics Task Force website, you can find them there, or find links to them. So, those are really the first steps that you can take. And if you're really feeling inspired by this, if you want this big kind of sweeping change at your camp, know that sometimes change can happen slowly, but encourage your superiors, your camp directors, and other folks to think about Leave No Trace outside of the normal box that it's currently in, because it's a super important value system that we want to bring to every camper and every scout and make it available to them. Now, you're not alone when it comes to bringing Leave No Trace to campers. And I mentioned earlier that certainly memorizing the 7 principles and what the bullet points say can be one way to practice or to remember what Leave No Trace is, but memorization doesn't work for everybody. So I'm going to go through some quick resources that you may come across at camp, or maybe you've already seen them, but these are really helpful ways to teach Leave No Trace in meaningful, engaging ways. And one of them is called Bigfoot's Playbook. And it's this really great curriculum book that the center's had out for the last couple of years. It's based in experiential education. So if you haven't heard that term before, the basics of experiential education is having typically a group experience, so doing some activity, and then having a reflection component to say, what is it that we did? Why is it significant? And what are we going to do moving forward? And I bet a lot of you have been through some form of experiential education before in like the realm of team building, when you've done low ropes or high ropes or things like that. So it's the same thing can be true for Leave No Trace. So Bigfoot's Playbook has 38 great activities that all line up with the different principles. It's aged for scouts that are 6 to 12 years old. And I wrote 12 plus on here because older, like teenagers, can actually find a lot of value in Bigfoot's Playbook by using the activities and facilitating the activities for their peers. So not only are they learning Leave No Trace, they're learning some facilitation skills at the same time. And that might be appropriate for some of your teenage participants that you have in your camp programs. There are a lot of materials that often go along with experiential education, or there can be. And in this case, there are a lot of Leave No Trace specific materials, but we want to make it really easy for everybody who uses this. So with Bigfoot's Playbook, there's a link to a PDF that you can download. It's 81 pages worth of different Leave No Trace cards and signs and prompts and activities and things that you can cut up and laminate and use and reuse and over and over and over again. And it really takes away the guesswork of knowing what is the Leave No Trace resource that I need here. If I'm running the durable surface hopscotch, oh, I need those. What's the non-durable surface card? What's the durable surface card? All those things are in there for you. Same with trash timeline. And then finally, I mentioned experiential education has that reflection component, but not everybody's, been doing facilitation professionally for 30 years. Facilitation can be really hard. I remember when I was a camp staff member, I always got so anxious before leading low ropes for my cabin because I never felt like I had the skills to lead a meaningful debrief. Well, we want to equip you with some of those skills, even if you've never done it before. And so with each of the 38 activities, there are between 2 and 3 open-ended questions that you can ask your group to kind of get the conversation going. With any facilitation, it's always great to ask open-ended questions and then let participants take the time to answer. Don't fill that dead space with your own thoughts as a facilitator. But as the reflection process happens, it will quickly turn into a conversation among participants that you're acting like the bumpers in the bowling alley to kind of keep them guided toward the ultimate goal of maybe it's plan ahead and prepare, maybe it's respect wildlife. So that's Bigfoot's Playbook. Bigfoot's Playbook also aligns with several of the adventure and rank and badge advancement and opportunities that are within the Boy Scout ecosystem. So this is actually a graphic that we put together after a study in 2017, I believe, where we wanted to figure out what Bigfoot's Playbook activities aligned with these different adventure requirements for Cub Scouts or different badge and rank advancement for Boy Scouts. So what you're seeing is, for example, the Weeblos badge and the Weeblo walkabout, durable surface hopscotch, durable surface mystery. Those things can contribute to the objectives of reaching the Weeblo walkabout. The same for Bare Necessity, or if you're Tiger Cub, Tigers in the Wild, Backyard Jungle, and certainly on and on. So what you're seeing in the green is a list of the activities from Bigfoot's Playbook that directly associate with each one of these opportunities. And your camp may focus on adventure or rank advancement. So a great resource to keep in mind. Turns out you can also use Legos to teach Leave No Trace. Now, I know every camp doesn't have Legos. Legos are also an expensive product that not everyone has. But the reason I bring this up is because there are new and novel ways to teach Leave No Trace that go beyond some of the older ways that we used to teach it. And Legos are a great way for young people to be creative and demonstrate like their interpretive skills about what Leave No Trace could mean to them. So what you're seeing here are the PDF worksheets that we have on lnt.org. And there are various activities, novice level activities, intermediate, and then more advanced. So, a novice level activity. Can you build the Leave No Trace swirl out of Legos? A more advanced one on the second page might be build a new observation deck where people can observe wildlife from a safe distance. So I'm sure you all know that young people gravitate toward Legos, and it's a great way to occupy their minds, and there's a STEM focus that you can bring in here. But similar to Bigfoot's Playbook, we also want to have that reflective component. So after the activity is complete, after the building phase, the however long you're spending on it, the back sides of these worksheets, each one of these squares has a question prompt for you. So you can ask those open-ended questions so you can get people thinking about what is it that you did, why is it significant, and what does it mean moving forward as it relates to Leave No Trace? How is it connected to Leave No Trace? How is it connected to you? So Legos can be a great way to teach Leave No Trace to young people. And the inspiration for this from the center actually came from a scouter named Josh Lamoth, who at an outdoor ethics conference in Kansas City, I believe, he was showing me some photos of how he represented the 7 principles with scenes, with Lego scenes. I believe one of those photos is on here, actually, the intermediate on the gray page, build your ideal campsite, I believe is a photo that Josh sent me. So, this ingenuity and thinking about Leave No Trace came from the scouting world, and let's keep using it within the scouting world. And then the last resource I want to touch on is something that isn't a direct resource that you will interface with, but it's something your camp program might be a part of, and that's the Leave No Trace Youth Program Accreditation. If you're not familiar with an accreditation program, it's basically something that your camp might be going through or has the opportunity to go through, where they can look at this list of best practices and standards from the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics. There are 11 of these different standards. And then they can do different things to fulfill these standards and kind of say, we are demonstrating the requirements of this standard. And really, this is a values-based accreditation. So there's a lot of education, high quality education components to this. A lot of what are the administrative sides of Leave No Trace within your camp program? What are the things you're actually doing with campers and staff on the ground? Staff training. How does staff learn about Leave No Trace from you at camp, which is super important. And then there's a planning element for the future as well. So depending on what your role is at camp and depending on what camp you're going to be working for this summer, you may be doing things related to this accreditation program. If you're unfamiliar with the accreditation or you think it's something that your camp should check out, all the info is available at lnt.org. It's also on the Outdoor Ethics website, the BSA Outdoor Ethics website. There's info there. So it's a really great program, and it camps that become accredited are ones that have demonstrated this really high quality ability to foster Leave No Trace as a philosophy, but also teach it effectively and support their staff in that teaching. So just some closing notes here. Camp is a wonderful place to teach Leave No Trace, and it offers a ton of opportunities through a lot of different activities. And the camp schedule and the physical locations both combined to make something that can be really meaningful, so that when scouts are finished with the camp experience, when they go home, when they've gone back to wherever they've come from, their communities, the goal is for them to take back this idea of outdoor ethics with them and continue practicing it, because it's not something we ever stop practicing. These values of respect and responsibility and caring, something we need to keep in the forefront. We need to keep practicing them, and we do them a lot day to day with other people within our communities, but we don't always do it with the environment every day. So all I'll say is thank you in advance for all of your efforts this summer and for future summers when you're working at camp to teach Leave No Trace. And please reach out to the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics or the Outdoor Ethics Task Force from the BSA to let us know how we can support you in your efforts at camp.
All right, thank you, Andrew. You should now have in your inbox a link to a survey for an evaluation of this roundtable. If you wouldn't mind filling out that survey. That helps us know what topics are of interest to you, things that we can improve on, and kind of gives us an idea of how effective these roundtables are. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out, I've also just barely posted the link to that evaluation in the chat as well. So you'll see it in the chat. You also have it in your email inbox from the same email that you received the link for this. So Paul and I have been checking the chat for any kind of questions. I haven't seen any questions at all, really. Paul, I don't know if you've seen any in there, which tells you Andrew's presentation was absolutely fantastic. But I think there's, okay, so we do have a question here. Andrew, is there a link to the Lego activities?
Yes, there is a link to the Lego activities. If you, I'll just briefly describe it. lnt.org, the Leave No Trace Center for Outdoor Ethics website. And if you navigate to the youth education section of the website, there's a youth educator library. And within that are the PDFs for the Lego activities, as well as a bunch of other free resources for educators.
Wonderful, thank you. A couple other questions have come up here. Where can they find the accreditation process or the information about that?
Yeah, absolutely. LNT.org has all the accreditation info as well. It's fairly comprehensive what's there, but it'll walk you through what the 11 standards are, what the process is for the accreditation, what the price is for the accreditation. I'll just plug this a little bit. What's kind of cool about the accreditation is that a council can invest in the accreditation materials, and then all of the camps underneath that council's umbrella, so let's say there are anywhere from 2 to 5 camps, all of them then have access to that accreditation material. It's a digital resource that we've created. It's all based in PDFs that are secured and fillable when need to be. So it's something that can be distributed to the camp programs within a council's umbrella. So it makes it more equitable for camp programs to be able to start the accreditation process with support from their council. But lnt.org, that's where you can find info about the accreditation. And
sorry, I was muted. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. The last thing I'll say is that Philmont and the Summit are actually both going through the accreditation, and it's neck and neck for who's going to become accredited first, the first BSA program to become fully accredited. So as soon as I know, you'll know.
Awesome. So there's some interest in the graphic that you shared that shows how the Bigfoot Playbook correlates with scouting advancement. Is that available on the LNT website, or is there a way that people could use that?
Yeah, I'll make sure that the Outdoor Ethics Task Force has a copy of that graphic, and they'll be able to put it up on their webpage.
Wonderful. So we'll make that available in the resources then on outdoorethics-bsa.org. Let's see. So there was a question about the accreditation link, but that's been posted. And then there was another question. Is there a free version of the Bigfoot Playbook?
There isn't a free version of the entire book. However, the Youth Educator Library at lnt.org does have a few select activities from Bigfoot's Playbook. So I'd say start out there and see if you like Bigfoot's Playbook. It's a pretty nominal price for that book. Just another plug, $15 for those 38 activities, and then the free PDF and everything that comes with it. So all that information is available at lnt.org, but you can totally preview some of the activities for free with the PDFs that we have in the Youth Educator Library.
Thank you. And I can definitely back that up, having been a camp director myself and have used the Bigfoot Playbook for programming. Very much worth the price. It's an excellent resource. So again, not too expensive. I would definitely go for it. Let's see. I'm not seeing any other questions in here. So I think I'll ask you a question, Andrew. Knowing kind of the life of a camp director and having spoken to several as well, how do you encourage a camp director to, I guess not so much take Leave No Trace seriously, but view it more as beyond just, oh, well, I'll give this information to my nature people and my environmental science people. How do you get them to, or encourage them to see the value in it and to start on this process that may seem overwhelming with all the other stuff they have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as a former camp director to former camp director, and for anybody else who's out there, a lot of times when it comes down to it, your budget is often a bottom line for things. So I always encourage camp directors and administrators to think about how Leave No Trace education can be something that could set your camp apart from other camps. There are a lot of camps out there. People have choices. Customers have choices for where they want to shop, so to speak. So what can set your camp apart? What can bring in more registrations? Maybe even after such a hard year that we had last year with the pandemic and not all camps operating. What's a way that you can distinguish yourself? One way that you can do that is communicate your values for stewardship and how Leave No Trace is integrated into what you do, and make it a value proposition so that parents and caregivers who might be responsible for those camp registrations are going to see your camp as something really valuable that maybe no other camp can offer them. So that would be one way I'd talk to a camp director about it. And the other way would be to think about Karen's example that she gave us, where the idea of trash reduction in a dining hall setting is not one of the 7 principles of Leave No Trace, but is very clearly connected with an ethic to be responsible in an outdoor setting, which camp is. So how could Leave No Trace practices within the infrastructure of your camp actually save you money so that you can reinvest into different programs, or you could pay, you could compensate your staff more now because you've slashed your trash pickup by 2/3, and now you have more money to be able to do things with. So while Leave No Trace is very much a values program, it's an ethic that we want to instill into individuals. There is absolutely financial implications as a business, because camp is a business in a lot of ways. So I encourage camp directors to think about it through that lens. And think critically about it too, because it's really something that I've seen demonstrated again and again, that programs can really set themselves apart and be, the champion stewardship program. And parents and community members really appreciate that, and it shows in the registrations.
All right, thank you. And I think that hits on the 2 major things about that a camp director will be looking for: marketing. How do we make our camp different? And definitely that bottom line is really essential. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat for tonight. So I think we will go ahead and close out our evening. Thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure having you. I hope everyone was able to get something very, very useful out of this. I know that I have. You've got some wonderful resources here. Again, please remember to fill out that roundtable evaluation. And then as soon as we get this video edited and ready to go, it will be posted on the Outdoor Ethics YouTube page. We've got one last question right here. It says, where can I find an outdoor ethics course or training or project from a master educator? That's a very, very good question. If you want to answer that, that's fine. I can add a couple other things to it as well.
Yeah, I'll just say from Leave No Trace's perspective, the Boy Scouts, the BSA is a provider, a course provider for master educator and trainer courses. So I believe that the Outdoor Ethics website has all, tries to stay current with all the different courses and things that are going on. And I think is also a hub where you can connect with other master educators or find folks. There are also BSA master educator Facebook groups as well, or there's at least one in particular I can think of. And I know that's a great forum where master educators exchange ideas and share information. So I'd say seek out those resources. I don't know if there are any others that come to mind for you, Matt.
Yeah, wonderful. So a couple things to add to that. The outdoorethics-bsa.org, there is a subpage within that. It's the main menu up at the top. If you click training, it will show you all of the courses that the BSA is offering that we have posted. I can tell you right now, my council here in Utah, Crossroads of the West, we are offering a Master Educator course in August. We'll have a non-trek, a trek section, and a paddle section. You can register for that at utahscouts.org/LNT. I also know that there's one happening, I think, in Northeast region this year. But both of those courses are posted on the outdoorethics-bsa.org website. And so you can find the registration information there. We'd love to have you attend one of those courses. So, oh, and the link just popped up. Thank you, Mark, in the chat. So if you want to follow that chat, you can find information about those courses. We are, let's say thank you to Scott Anderson for hosting this meeting. Andrew, of course, thank you for being here. And then Paula Booth, Chandra, and Paul for helping out with this as well. We'll go ahead and stop the recording now. And if you want to stay for 30 minutes of socialization, that's great. If you've got other things to do, go ahead and run. But thank you for joining us.